And we are live. Welcome to the NBA Strategy Show. It is Wednesday, November 9th. I am Josh Engleman. I am joined by Adam Scherer. We are brought to you by Prize Picks. And depending on which site you play on, you've got a different size slate. Standard issue 12 gamer locking at 7 o'clock tonight on DraftKings. FanDuel decided to throw a wrench into the plans. They lock at 5:30 Eastern time. So happy that I'm not on the deeper dive for that one. I actually have live before lock, and that is helpful today. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. Adam, how much did you enjoy your day off? Because I really enjoyed mine.
Yeah, it was fun. I went out for the first time in like 3 weeks. But I would have preferred to just play basketball and not interact with people.
That's fair. It was nice to not think about it at all. Just like one day where I know that I don't have to get back and sit down and
Yeah.
go through 2 hours worth of prep.
I mean, that's so it's like I was torn yesterday, like if I was going to go out or if I was going to play NHL, because NHL had a 50K to first contest. And I wanted to play, but it was also just like my only day off from content is Sunday, and obviously I'm grinding football on Sundays. It's just I'll just take the day to not spend any time sitting at my computer.
It helped to just mentally reset. I did a bunch of running around through town and everything, just not being a slave to, it's 1:30. I'd like to sit down at 2 o'clock and find out what the injury report news was. Even just little stuff like that. Happy to not have it. So yeah, FanDuel. The Magic Mavs game was moved up a bit for a tropical storm in Florida. And FanDuel was like, we're just going to keep it instead of dropping it clean from the slate. So FanDuel locks at 5:30 tonight, an hour and a half before the next tip of any games and multiple hours before the 10 o'clock games start. The good news is Dallas stinks from a DFS perspective. They are the slowest team in the league. So it does make that game environment a little bit less interesting. We're going to get to that shortly. But yeah, hit the like button. And Adam, you want to get this started?
Yep.
All righty. Then let's do it with, unfortunately, the game that we need to talk about, the Dallas Mavericks in Orlando. 6.5-point favorites, 217 total. Now, for this one, the real benefit to today's slate is that nobody is on the back end of a back-to-back, which means the injury report is updated. Q tags are real. Whatever we've got is all legitimate. Every team had to submit it before today. So we are getting real injury report information. For Dallas, no Christian Wood. He is out with a left knee sprain. Q tag on Tim Hardaway. We've got pretty sizable ownership coming to two people on the FanDuel side here. Luka Doncic is 11-8, and he transcends sort of anything. You can feel good about having Luka in a lineup, even if it locks at 5:30. It's just Luka. The other guy that's pulling the ownership, however, is $3,600 power forward center eligible Dwight Powell at 20%. I feel like not locking Dwight Powell into a fifth of my lineups in a game that starts an hour and a half before the rest of them is probably the method that I want. Do I think that he's a decent value play? Yes. Do I think that he's stepping into a bunch of extra time because Christian Wood is out? Probably not. Let's start with Luka. Do you have anything interesting about Luka?
No, he's really good at basketball. But there's nothing different. Not playing any minutes with Christian Wood, I guess, could increase his rates, but I don't really know that they're capable of increasing. He already uses every single possession. So, nothing new, nothing too interesting.
Now, obviously, if Tim Hardaway Jr. ends up out, this Dallas outlook changes. We do create more minutes and more value, and they become a little bit more interesting as this early lock. But when you look at this, do you 3,600, so $100 above the minimum? What do you think about Dwight Powell in this spot? Does that ownership seem correct to you? Are you more likely to just sort of cross off a game like this, not really pay too much attention to it unless you are getting someone like Luka?
Sorry, I missed your question because Chris was DMing me.
No worries.
And because I hate you and I'm arrogant.
That's fair. That good callback to yesterday.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're always any lineup you get with Luka, you don't care too much. But what do you see for this Dwight Powell ownership? The fact that we haven't projected, even if we think that that's a little high, do you like the idea of getting to Powell? Do you think that there are extra minutes here for him to be getting to? What do we do here with someone that's pulling that kind of ownership on this sort of slate?
So I like that he's power forward eligible. I think it makes it more reasonable to me. He probably is playing into the mid-20s. He started the second half last game closed the game. He had played 26 minutes the game before when he started. I think he's a good value. I do agree with your point that um, there's just a good chance that with 12 games tipping later and the first of those 12 being an hour and a half later, you're just going to get other value that opens up and is necessarily lower owned than Dwight Powell. So I do think it's a really interesting spot. Like from a 150 max perspective, I think it's really difficult to deal with. Like I don't want to just cut Dwight Powell's projection because he's in the first game. But if you're somebody making like one lineup or three lineups or whatever, and you can actually really pay attention to what's in those lineups, as a tiebreaker, I like the idea of not using him and just assuming somebody comparable is going to open up and be much, much lower owned. But from an overall standpoint, I would just expect to get a decent amount of him, across 150 lineups because he is a good value.
Yeah, like the Dorian Finney-Smiths and Bullocks and Kleebers of the world. Like I don't give a shit about those guys on a day like today. But what happens if Tim Hardaway Jr. is also out? Who gets the bump? Because I think we do create more value. I just don't like if that's coming from Reggie Bullock, then it's not that interesting. I don't know how much further Dorian Finney-Smith can go. Does that make Josh Green more interesting at that point? Ntilikina's back. Okay.
He's running the second unit. You're not going to have Christian Wood, so I already think that's a benefit for Dinwiddie in those minutes because Wood's such a high usage guy. If you take Hardaway Jr. out too, that's just Spencer Dinwiddie out there running with Maxi Kleber and Josh Green and whoever else they end up throwing in there, Campazzo. Like, I think it's a benefit for Spencer Dinwiddie.
Okay. Keep your eyes peeled for that one. Clearly on FanDuel, we're going to get that news anyway before 5:30. So you'll get that news on the deeper dive likely with Adam later today. I don't have anything else here to add for Dallas. Do you?
Nope.
Then we go to the opposite side of this one for Orlando. This one also has really big ripple effects. The normal guys that are out, but Paolo Banchero is questionable. That could really create some nonsense. Left ankle sprain. If he's in, then I don't really have a ton of interest in this Orlando team at all. I wouldn't be likely to get to much outside of maybe Jalen Suggs. If Paolo is out, we're freeing up 28+% usage and 30 something minutes. Where do we go if Paolo is out? Because I think we could safely say that Orlando's not interesting if he's in.
Yeah, same boat. I mean, the highest owned guy on FanDuel right now from the Magic is Jalen Suggs at 1%. If Paolo's in, the whole team is pretty uninteresting. If he's out, you are opening up a lot of usage, a lot of rebounding and assist opportunities. Jalen Suggs, I think, would look a lot better. Franz Wagner would look a lot better. Wagner already priced up to 7,300, but Suggs sitting at 5,900 would look good. Probably more usage available for Wendell Carter Jr. and Bol Bol as well. So I do think those guys all look better if Banchero's out. You're probably getting more minutes for Chuma Okeke. Terrence Ross, I assume, would move back into the starting lineup.
Righty. I don't have much else to add here for this game. It's not even really worth talking about until we find out more about Tim Hardaway Jr. and Paolo Banchero. And with this game locking at 5:30, we'll know that information basically by 5 o'clock. And it's not all that relevant to the DraftKings side of it. So at this point, I'm ready to just move on to what you would call the regular slate.
Yep.
Portland Trailblazers, 4.5-point favorites in Charlotte, 220 total. On the Blazers side, we went from a day where I wasn't sure we were going to get Dame or Simons, and then we got Dame and Simons. That was interesting to see. Everybody's available here for Portland except for Keon Johnson with the Q tag, but probable tags on Lillard, Simons, Grant, Nurkic, and Justice Winslow, which means not all that interesting of a team to me. 3% owned Nurk is the high mark on DraftKings. Josh Hart still a little underpriced on FanDuel. Shooting guard, small forward eligibility, 5,800, pulling about 10% ownership. I think that's warranted to Hart. I do have a little interest in Nurk, but I find Portland to be less interesting than I wanted them to be in a matchup against Charlotte.
Yeah, agreed. Lillard and Simons coming back just kind of creates the situation where you have a team that had their prices adjust somewhat because of injury, and now those injuries don't exist anymore. Lillard, 9,200, played, I think, 35 minutes last game. Obviously, you can, 34 and a half, you obviously can get to him, but there's going to be a lot of other options in that price range that look good. Anthony Simons was limited to 31 and a half minutes. I assume he plays a few more today. He's 7,400, not going to look that appealing at that price tag with Lillard in. I think Nurk's the only guy that does look reasonably good. He's only 7,200, but he does, lose usage with Lillard and Simons back as well. So I don't think he's a true priority, but he's the only guy on this team. I guess, I already said Lillard, somewhat interesting, but outside of that, Nurkic is the only guy on this team I think that I have interest in.
I'm a little worried about Nurk's minutes right now. Trendon Watford's back. That's just another guy that could like be a facsimile of a center for this team. They are like, he's all over the place in minutes. Sometimes you see these games where he plays 34, 35 minutes. A lot of the times you're getting, 28 or potentially even less than that. So I got him in for 29 now. He does stand out to me as a guy that I'm going to be getting to, but I'm a little nervous about his minutes right now.
Yeah, and we saw that closing lineup last game that we had been seeing early in the season where Justice Winslow closes with the starters. So you had Simons, Hart, Grant, Lillard, and Winslow. I do think that's a real concern. You still got 28 and a half minutes from Nurkic, but yeah, like I expect 28 to 29 minutes from him most games.
One other thing that I do want to touch on here, Dame Lillard is 8,500 on FanDuel. We have him projected for 1.5% ownership. He is just permanently an interesting GPP play. If he's 8,500, this is a guy that can score 40 real points in a game when things are cooking. If he's unowned, he's just a guy that I'd like to have, 10% of. It'll just always feel good in a GPP, but just want to put that out there. All righty. Then we go over to the Charlotte side. We did get DSJ playing on Monday, so he was questionable with that ankle injury. After that, it's still no LaMelo. It's still no Gordon Hayward. Cody Martin still doubtful. So we're pretty used to the Charlotte rotation for now. Terry Rozier pulling heavy ownership, 25% on DraftKings, 28 on FanDuel. Am I missing something here? 7,800 on DK, 8K on FanDuel. Like, I think Terry Rozier is a solid play. This seems excessive.
Yeah, it's similar to what we saw on Monday, where Rozier is a good play, but I don't think he's like that like aggressively better than other guard options you're going to get. You still have a million teams playing today. So yeah, I mean, I think Terry Rozier is a good play. He's 7,800. He's going to play a lot of minutes. He's still playing without Gordon Hayward. All that's great. I think 25% ownership is a little bit insane.
Yeah, you and me both. Like, I think he grades out as the best Hornet, but I mean, you can make a case that it's Dennis Smith Jr. at $1,500 cheaper on DraftKings. Like, I don't think those guys are all that different.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I don't want to downplay Rozier. He's played 126 minutes this year and averaged 1.2 DraftKings points per minute with a 30% usage rate. And some of those minutes were with Hayward. So, like, I do think he's a very, very good play. The ownership seems a little bit high.
Do you like anything else from Charlotte? DSJ, PJ Washington, Kelly Oubre? To me, like, there's not all that many different directions we can go on this big of a slate.
Yeah, there's nothing else that really stands out. Mason Plumlee's kind of always fine. Same with Kelly Oubre. It is extremely likely that Kelly Oubre has a good game tonight because my best lineup on Monday had him shoot 8 for 20 and score 20 fantasy points. If he had done like literally anything, I would have made a lot of money. So very, very likely he shoots the lights out tonight because that's how these things work. But aside from that narrative, there's nothing that really stands out outside of Rozier.
Looks like I got to deal with this one for like the 8 millionth time. And it's all my fault, but it's CHO as Charlotte because they used to be a different Charlotte. It was CHA on Basketball Reference when they were the Hornets the first time. They're not the same Hornets any longer. So Basketball Reference uses CHO, which is why I use CHO. You guys will be all right. Just letting everybody know.
Can you just adjust and not use this stupid abbreviation?
No, I can't. I'm not recoding any of that shit for anybody else's pleasure. I hope it bothers everyone.
It bothers me now that I know it's there.
Now it's definitely not changing.
I'm definitely not looking at. I'm just going to stop looking at run sheets now.
Oh, now? Oh, man. All right. Nothing else here for Charlotte?
No.
All right. That's easy enough. Let's go to Denver. Highest total on today's slate coming up in this one. I'm going to save this workbook because it just told me that it's not going to save anymore. It might not save right now. Okay. Feeling good. Denver, 5.5 points.
Stupid abbreviation.
I deserve that. Denver, 5.5 point favorites in Indiana, 235.5 total. For Denver, this is just a full strength Denver team. I mean, doubtful tags on Ish Smith and Zeke Naji, but shouldn't matter. The only person getting any ownership on DraftKings is $4,900 Bones Highland. I'm going to go ahead and skip the 13% ownership that he's getting today. I don't really see that as something that I'm trying to do on a 12-game slate. On the FanDuel side, Jamal Murray's 14% owned, where he's still just 5,900. Jokic gets to 10%, which I think is more than warranted at 10,700. Not a lot here to like for Denver. Talk to me about the Bones Highland ownership, I guess.
If they continue running the rotation that they ran last game, he's going to be a really good play. I just don't know if they do
Hmm.
that. He played 23 and a half minutes last game. Typically, he's playing like 18. I, like Jamal Murray played 32 minutes, so it's not like he stole minutes from him or anything that, isn't going to happen. There's nothing about the rotation last game that like can't happen again. Everybody played their normal minutes. Porter played 30, KCP played 32, Gordon played 30, Murray played 32. So uh, basically Christian Braun just wasn't in the rotation. You got a little bit more run for Bones Highland. If you're going to get 22 to 24 minutes from Bones Highland, he is underpriced at this price tag. I just don't know for sure that you're going to get that again, but it does make him look like a good play. I agree with you that 13% ownership is probably a little bit aggressive for a backup guard on a 12/13 game slate, but I do think he looks like a good play if they're going to get him out there for a few more minutes.
Yeah, he just guys like that are just going to scare me if they're pulling ownership on a slate this big because you're just inevitably going to get somebody priced in the same range that's going to play 30 minutes today. And it's just going to be so much harder. Like, no matter what the rates are, it's going to be so much harder for that guy to not beat out Bones Highland if he's playing 7+ minutes more than him.
And to be clear, the rates are insane. 30.5% usage rate, 30.3% assist percentage, 1.22 DraftKings points per minute. This is kind of like Terry Rozier to me. I think he's a good play. I am surprised to see this much ownership on a slate this size.
Same here. Same here. Any particular thoughts on the 10-7 price tag on Jokic on FanDuel? Like, obviously the usage rate is down, but this feels like a pretty good spot.
It just feels like the same thing that I've been saying about Jokic for, I don't know, the whole season. He's a really, really good play. Obviously, he's averaging 1.5 fantasy points per minute. The issue with Jokic is that not only is he relatively expensive, but the opportunity cost at center is just always so high. Allocating your salary to a center position where, especially on a slate of this size, there are just going to be 6 to 8K centers that have big games today because almost all of them are playing and they're all really good point per minute guys. It just becomes difficult for that to be a solid roster construction. That being said, if Jokic goes for 70 or 80, which he can, then you need him. So like that's the reason you would play him at modest ownership is you're just hoping for that game. But it just still becomes kind of difficult to prioritize, I think, when you can spend half the salary at that position and still get a really high ceiling.
Anything else for the Nugs?
No. Well, I guess specifically mentioning that Jamal Murray, is playing 32 minutes and is 6,300. I saw somebody say in chat, you're going to get that 40-point game soon. Yeah, it's going to happen. Jamal Murray is just going to have games where he goes nuts. From an, average, from a median standpoint, he doesn't look like anything special at 6,300, but you're just going to get those Jamal Murray games.
Yep. For Indiana, complicated team right now. Aaron Nesmith questionable again. Chris Duarte obviously still out. We've got massive ownership coming in some places here. Miles Turner's 34% owned on DK today. He's 5,700. He's $900 more expensive on FanDuel. Gets the power forward eligibility. Still 24% owned there. Buddy Hield playing massive minutes as of late. 15% owned. Jalen Smith, our boy, 16% owned already on DraftKings, which is wild to see. And we didn't even talk about the guy that I think gets like sort of the biggest benefit if Nesmith is out again. Does Andrew Nembhard play 27, 28, 30 minutes if we don't see Nesmith? Because he's 3,500 and not pulling all that much ownership. Indy's tricky today because there's a lot to like.
Yeah, well, and they're tricky too because their rotations are just kind of shit in the front court too. I know you took off the massive 15 gamer, but Jalen Smith, you got the Jalen Smith game. After playing 11 minutes two games ago, he played 29 minutes, scored 34.75 DraftKings points. So like you're always getting a ceiling with him, but who knows how many minutes he's going to play. Andrew Nembhard, yeah, he had played 27, 28 minutes 2 games ago. He got the start with Naismith out, played 33.5 minutes. I wasn't really sure how to project him because I didn't know how much Mathurin was going to play or cut into that. But yeah, he ended up, being good. He's averaged 0.82 DraftKings points per minute. So if he's starting, that's a reasonable value play. Mathurin likely is playing 30 minutes off the bench at no ownership. So that's interesting. And then you get to the guys that are pulling ownership. Miles Turner still somehow $5,700 looks great. There's obviously some foul risk here, but he's 5,700. Like he just looks really good. He's averaging 1.3 DraftKings points per minute this year and can play 28 to 30 minutes. Played 37 minutes last game. So clearly can play more than can play more than 20 to 30. I think you project him for around 30, but like
Yeah, I gave him
there's
30.
the upside for him to play a lot more. Halliburton's been fantastic all season long. Can expect 34-ish minutes from him. Can expect around 36 from Hield. So, yeah, I think Turner, Halliburton, Hield are the pieces you can get to here and feel confident.
Yeah.
Jalen Smith pulling 16.5% ownership. Jalen Smith's just always funny to look at his ownership. It's like, oh, he played bad last game, so he's 1% owned. Oh, he played good last game, so he's 20% owned.
I don't like that it's the guy that you and I are like interested in too.
Right. But he's just a really volatile player. And
Yeah.
typically with players like that, when they're popular, I'm not going to get them very frequently. When they're not popular, I am. And then it's scary not to. I mean, obviously, he's a good point per minute guy. We did talk on Monday about his rates with Miles Turner. Clearly, those corrected a bit. You know, he had a good game, but he has taken a hit in terms of his production with Miles Turner on the floor this year. He's averaged 0.83 DraftKings points per minute now in 86 minutes with Turner, 13.7% rebounding percentage, 17.5% usage rate. I had said that I thought it was likely you saw his rates go up, but that there was a good chance that they still just kind of stabilized at a lower point than when Turner's not on the floor. So that's something else to keep in mind. You know, he's not as productive with Turner out there, and you just run, there's all sorts of volatility in his playing time.
Assuming Naismith is out, are we giving Nembhard what, minimum 28 minutes?
I think I would go 28. Like, I don't have confidence that he's in the closing lineup again.
Okay.
But he also easily could be. Maybe I'd go 30. Like, he played 28 off the bench in the previous game.
If Naismith is in, that's just going to essentially, in theory, remove Nembhard from being in that consideration.
I think so, yeah. And then it also probably lowers Matherin's projection a bit.
Okay. Yeah, so I gave Nembhard 24 minutes. I have Naismith in for 20 because Naismith was that guy before he got hurt. At the very least, he's going to eat those minutes up from Nembhard. So I did want to talk about it at least a little bit. I don't have anything else here for Indiana. They look good.
Yeah, agreed. Miles, and you know, Miles Turner's ownership, I guess we didn't touch on that. He's getting 34% ownership on DraftKings right now. This is another spot where it's like, I think he's a very, very good play. I probably think Turner is a better play than Rozier or Highland of the guys that we've kind of talked about in this situation, but he's also getting the most ownership. It's really easy to see how this goes sideways for Miles Turner. Like, fouls Jokic, and 1/3 of the field is just like, oh shit, my guy's sitting on the bench. So like, there is risk there. That's a lot of ownership for a center on a 12 or 13 game slate, but also very clearly mispriced.
Yeah, it's completely warranted. I mean, this is a dude that projects for 3 blocks a game. When that breaks high, like, you just start stacking up points so easily.
Right. Yeah, and like, he can score and everything too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways for him to get there. If he plays anywhere close to his normal minutes, he's smashing this price tag.
Yeah, you have to assume that if he gets anything higher than what, like, the 30-minute run, that it's probably going pretty well for Miles Turner. Like, there's a reason he's still out there. This game is competitive. If he's playing 34 minutes, like, you probably need him.
Yeah, like the only, I mean, obviously it's one game. Like, he could just play like shit, but like, it's really, really difficult to imagine Miles Turner plays 30 minutes and just doesn't destroy 5,700. The issue is just, I mean, there's foul risk. There always is.
Absolutely. Anything else for Indiana?
Did you know Turner has a 26% usage rate this year?
I knew that it was higher. I haven't gotten the full freight yet for him.
Yeah,
there's just so many guards that shoot.
I just didn't know off the top of my head what it was, but yeah, 26%, higher than all of the other starters. It is second highest on the team behind Matherin.
See where that ends up. I mean, that's what he wanted. We'll see where that gets him. If we find out that a team led by Miles Turner is apparently not what leads you to victories, but we'll see. Schedule for the rest of the day. NFL Strategy Show Ownership Edition comes up after this at 11 a.m. NHL Strategy Show in at 2 p.m. Adam will be back for the deeper dive at 4:45. And then NBA Live before lock, 6 p.m. That will be myself. That will be Eric Lindquist. We will be going for an hour and a half breaking down this one. And I'll be able to sweat a little bit of the first game on FanDuel. Maybe you guys could have some showdown contests on DraftKings if you want to join us. But that's what we've got going schedule-wise. Hit that like button. We're up to 460 people, 52 likes. We should be up over 100 by now. That should be easy stuff. The Utah Jazz are 3.5-point underdogs in Atlanta, 226 total for the Jazz. Q tag on Jared Vanderbilt, which is actually kind of important here. Not a lot that I'm liking on the Utah side. $5,100 Colin Sexton stands out to me as the best option, but Jordan Clarkson is just over 10% owned on DK. Jared Vanderbilt, if he plays, is just over 10% owned on DraftKings. Clarkson also getting that ownership on FanDuel. I don't find Utah to be all that appealing, and I like Sexton. I'm a little surprised to see he's not getting more ownership.
Yeah, I continue to like Colin Sexton. He's just been playing a brand new role ever since that game he started with Conley out. Once again, was closing halves last game. Didn't close the second half because it was garbage time. The bench unit came in, but he's closed every single competitive half since he started that game. And so you can pretty confidently project him for around 28 minutes. He's producing well. I think this is a really good example of somebody that shouldn't be 1% owned if Bones Highland is going to be 13. $200 more expensive. They're kind of like the same play to me. Sexton's going to play more minutes than Highland, barring something really weird happening in the rotation. Yep. He's a good fantasy producer. I'll gladly play some Colin Sexton at 1%, where other people are playing Highland at 13. This season, 1.01 DraftKings points per minute for Sexton, 25.5% usage rate, only a 12.5% assist percentage, but I'll take my chances there. I'm pretty confident in his minutes. Lauri Markkanen, 7,600, always fine if I get to him, but that price tag is getting pretty close to correct, I think. Clarkson's been playing great, 6,400. He's going to go out and shoot. He's getting 11% ownership. No issues with him. 1.1 DraftKings points per minute this year. Leads the team with a 26% usage rate, 24% assist percentage as well. So I think that there are guys here that look pretty good.
I was just surprised to see that lack of Sexton ownership. The Bones point is really interesting. Like, I would rather have Sexton than Clarkson. I'm really surprised to see that dichotomy in their ownership, but
I don't know if I would say rather. I think it's kind of similar though when you consider that Clarkson's more expensive. I think that relative to salary, they're going to project pretty similarly. So I'm surprised that Clarkson's pulling that much more.
Yeah, the $1,300 difference is the huge gap there, considering these guys aren't going to be that far away in minutes at this point.
I wonder if we're just seeing the industry sort of still under project Sexton because they use season averages and don't notice that everything's changed.
Probably. Makes sense to me. Seems like there's a lot of bad out there.
Yeah.
We go to the Atlanta side of this one. Q tag on Trae Young. That has a little bit of a trickle-down effect towards the rest of the Hawks, so we're going to have to keep our eye on that one. No one's getting any major ownership here except for 9% going to Onyeka Okongwu on DK at 3,600. Sure. Don't really know how to read into that. Obviously, if Trae Young is out, DeJounte Murray looks much better. John Collins looks much better. Everybody
you would
looks
think,
better.
But also tanked my Monday, him and Hunter.
Sure. You're going to more Atlanta. If Trae Young is in, I think John Collins is my favorite Atlanta guy, but I don't really love all that much. How do you feel about Atlanta here?
Yeah, I mean, if Young is in, to me, they're just kind of like secondary tournament plays. Collins at 6,100, averaging around a fantasy point per minute, but his usage is down this year. He's fine, but not any sort of a priority. Young, Capella, Murray, like you can always play those guys just hoping that they go nuts, but they're priced around where they should be. Okongwu is someone that I get to occasionally, just expecting him to play like 18 to 20 minutes off the bench. Him getting 9% ownership, I think probably just speaks to a relative lack of value on the slate right now. That probably, goes away as things open up. But yeah, there's nothing that really stands out here. And to your point, if Trae Young is out, DeJounte Murray does look better. John Collins and DeAndre Hunter do look better. They just absolutely tanked my lineups at very low ownership on Monday, which was really frustrating. The rotations in that game made absolutely no sense. Everybody just played like 24 minutes except for DeJounte Murray got to 32. I would expect...
Hey, don't sell AJ Griffin short. He got to 31.
Yeah, he went nuts. I would expect if Young is out that you get normal playing time from these guys today.
Yeah, you would think. It would make some sense at least.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a weird game. Like they were getting destroyed by Milwaukee. They came back. Second unit, I assume, played well and stayed out there.
Yeah. I don't have anything else here for Atlanta. But Trae Young news is everything. Like if Trae Young is in, it's not all that interesting of a team.
Agreed.
Oh. The Detroit Pistons are 11.5. Jalen Johnson is not taking John Collins. Roses, you got to stop, man. Every single guy you mentioned is like a new inner circle Hall of Famer. We're talking about Walker Kessler dominating the league. You just got to shut up, man. It's I can't take it any longer. Jalen Johnson is not taking John Collins' spot. What are we doing here? John Collins is actually good and makes $20 million. They might trade John Collins, but it's not like John Collins is just going to find himself playing 16 off the bench. The Detroit Pistons are 11.5-point underdogs in Boston, 226 total. For Detroit, they're starting to get some guys back. Marvin Bagley is doubtful, but working his way back. Alec Burks is questionable, working his way back. I am going to continue to get to Cade Cunningham, 7,500 on DraftKings, 7,900 on FanDuel. If this game is competitive, I have to assume that Cade is doing a lot of that heavy lifting. I think he looks really good. I probably have him over projected as per usual, but Cade is the guy that I want.
Yeah, I mean, I play Cade pretty much constantly. Obviously, it's not a very good spot against Boston in Boston, but Cunningham is reasonably priced at 7,500. He's getting 13% ownership. Rozier's getting 25. I think Rozier is the better play. Like, if you're playing one of them, only one of them in cash, I would say Rozier. If I have a lineup where ownership doesn't matter, I would rather have Rozier, but probably shouldn't be twice as popular as Cade Cunningham, given just how good Cade Cunningham is. And then the other thing I mentioned the other day, and we sort of saw it against Orlando, not quite to the extent that I was hoping for, because the bench just played more minutes than normal. But Detroit has condensed their rotation. Corey Joseph is not playing. So there is the potential in competitive games for these guys to play more. Sadiq Bey played 36.5 minutes last game. Cunningham played 35.5. Ivy got to 34. You only got 30 from Bogdanovich, but like obviously he can play more as well. I do like, from a fantasy standpoint, the rotations Detroit has been running for their starters. Whether or not they hang in this game and play all of those minutes is a totally separate question. But I think this is a situation where for the next at least game or two for Detroit, you're just going to see them under-projected across the industry because their season averages do not represent what these guys are going to play in competitive games.
Yeah. I have Cade and Terry Rozier projected exactly the same on DraftKings right now.
That seems a little aggressive on Cade, probably.
Does it?
Just the fact that it's a 12-point spread and they're in Boston.
Rozier 1.13 so far this season. Cade 1.16. I mean,
I think
1.13 is a FanDuel rate, but for all intents and purposes, it's going to be
okay.
Mildly similar. I have just the per minute rates as the FanDuel rates, but basically next to each other. It's close.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree they're close. I don't necessarily think one should be twice as popular as the other. One thing I do want to double back to, if Alec Burks goes, I would expect, I mean, maybe they just like replace Amadou Diallo with Alec Burks in the rotation. That's possible. But if Burks does play, I would be hesitant to count on those extra minutes that I was just talking about for the starters, because there's a decent chance they just throw Burks into the rotation in addition to everybody else.
I gave Burks minutes and have it as a 10-man rotation today.
Yeah, I think it could go either way, but I'm just a lot less confident if Burks is active.
I think they want Burks to be playing for them. So
yeah, it's just a matter of like, do they replace Diallo or do they add Burks to everything else?
Anything else here for these low-owned guys? I don't have anything else for Bogdanovich, Ivy, Bey, Stewart. It's just too big of a slate to really dig into it.
Yeah, no, all that I have to say about him is that, again, I think that they do play a lot of minutes. Like Jaden Ivey at 5,500, he's getting 9% ownership, so he's getting more than he did the other day. But I do really like the playing time he's been getting.
All righty. On the Boston side, pretty easy here. No Robert Williams, Luke Cornett off of the injury report. Highest owned guy on the DraftKings side is 6% owned, $8,400 Jaylen Brown, who I do think stands out at shooting guard small forward, but not as like a overwhelming priority. On the FanDuel side, Al Horford is the highest owned guy at 14%. I actually like Marcus Smart a little bit at just 9%, but no like obvious, this is a guy I have to have for Boston. But if you get Brown, I mean, Tatum seems like a tough sell, but he's just been exceptional this year. Do you see anything for Boston that you want to get to? 11.5-point line is tough.
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably continue getting to $8,400 Jaylen Brown at low ownership. It's just been something I'm doing a lot of, and I don't think it's going to change here. But yeah, it's nothing that's like a true priority. Like, there's nobody on Boston that I look at and say, like, oh, this is one of the best plays on the slate. From a tournament standpoint, factoring in ownership, I do think Jaylen Brown's going a bit under-owned. But yeah, there's not much. If you get to some Brown, cool. If you can find the money for Tatum, great. He's been fantastic this year. Malcolm Brogdon, if this game's competitive, probably plays 25, 26 minutes. He's a reasonable Bones Highland pivot for 500 more, but it's not like I'm looking at any of these guys saying like they're great or I can't believe they're low owned. Like I get it.
Yeah, it's just there shouldn't be ownership here. Red Skittle says Blake Griffin's going to take Al Horford's spot soon, so a good callback there. Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. I like the Jaylen Brown price just in relationship to Tatum, but Tatum has obviously taken a bit of a step forward in his game in basically all facets so far this season. Nothing else here for Boston for me.
Me neither.
The New York Knickerbockers, 2.5-point dogs in Brooklyn, 223 total. For the Knicks, we are still without Mitchell Robinson. Quentin Grimes is questionable. We got Jericho Sims Day on Monday, which we didn't see coming. Not that it went well for Sims or anything at 17 minutes, but
it went well for anybody that late swapped off of Hartenstein.
Sure did. I have no idea what Quentin Grimes will do to a lineup now that Cam Reddish has played 37 and 29 minutes since Grimes has been out. Cam Reddish is 13% owned on DraftKings. He is 3,200, which really complicates matters here. Let's start with Reddish. How do you handle him? How do you project him? What do you do with him?
If he's starting, last game I gave him 28 minutes. He basically played that, so I would do the same thing here. If Grimes is out, I think Grimes being out is probably the only way Reddish is starting. I expect Grimes to start if he's in. But if we assume Reddish is starting, I think he plays around 28 minutes. He hasn't been a good fantasy producer. 209 minutes played this year, 0.65 DraftKings points per minute, doing nothing in the way of peripherals, and only has a 15.5% usage rate. So I do think that's important to keep in mind. You're not talking about a team where Cam Reddish can just go out there and gun and rack up fantasy points. He's playing a bunch of minutes with Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle and RJ Barrett. He's very, very clearly not the priority, but that's still a really cheap price tag for somebody that's going to approach 30 minutes and does have some ability to score fantasy points. So he's going to look like a good value, I think, if he's starting. If he's coming off the bench, I will not play him.
Okay. I will probably not be playing much of anything here. The Knicks did maintain a very strict rotation for the 4 and the 5. Hartenstein, Obi Toppin, Jericho Sims, Julius Randle, split all 96 minutes that exist for the 4 and the 5. Have to assume that they're not trying to drop anybody down any further than that. So that's the best that we could hope for. If that's the case, what do you see between those 4 guys? Because to me, maybe a little bit of Randle, but the most likely scenario is that I'm not getting to anything in that front court.
So I think it's interesting to look at Randle and Toppin. They closed alongside each other in that game. Now you're playing Brooklyn, who, you have Nick Claxton. You don't have a massive front court. You can very easily play Randle and Toppin if you want to. So I think they're kind of interesting. Last game we only got 32.5 minutes from Randle. He was in some foul trouble. The game before that, he had played 40. I think you could see 36, 37 minutes from Randle here. If they're not going to go 48 minutes at center with Sims and Hartenstein like they do with Hartenstein and Robinson, and then also you can get more Obi Toppin. It's a very risky play if you want to go to Toppin. He played 26 minutes last game. He'd only played, I don't remember, 16, 17 the game before that. Naturally, I had 40% of him in that game and none of him in the game where he played 26. But the minutes are there. If Jericho Sims starts again, you have to assume he's playing, 18, 20 minutes. He was in foul trouble. He could have been intended to play more. I don't know. But him and Hartenstein were both in foul trouble. If Sims starts, I assume you're getting 16 to 18 minutes there. I assume Hartenstein is playing his normal 25, 26. And so that's going to leave, a handful of minutes for the Randle Toppin lineups. So you can, project those guys to play a couple of extra minutes. It does, I think, make Julius Randle a little bit underpriced because he's basically priced for his 33 minutes a game that he's been playing.
I gave Randle 34. I gave Toppin 20. So with the assumption they play around 6 minutes alongside each other, and then the rest of the minutes go to Hartenstein and Sims, which makes it tough. But Randle does become that guy. A lot of variability there. You can see Toppin get those 26 again. You could see Hartenstein get a little bit more. There are a couple different ways that goes. I just don't know how much it's actually going to matter given the pricing, which is helpful. And then I don't have much interest in Barrett or Brunson other than they're clearly guys you could roster, but are not essential.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the same thing that I've been saying about Barrett. He's got a 25% usage rate. His shot's going to start falling. He's been playing a bit better recently. Jalen Brunson, obviously, a good fantasy producer, 1.1 DraftKings points per minute. He's another guy where he's 7,100 and pulling 1% ownership. I don't think Terry Rozier should be 25 times more popular than Jalen Brunson.
Yeah.
But, I do think Rozier is the better play. It's just you're not going to get any ownership to Brunson. I like that.
On the Brooklyn side of this one, still no Kyrie, no Watanabe, still no TJ Warren. Joe Harris is 20% owned on DraftKings and 25% owned on FanDuel. If you've been watching this show, you realize we don't have a ton of value so far. Royce O'Neal is 14% owned on DraftKings and 36% owned on FanDuel. I'm just going to let you know right now, I'm not going to play 36% of Royce O'Neal when he's appropriately priced today. I don't know why that ownership is coming in. Does he look like a decent play because he plays 36 minutes a game? Yeah. I'm not like, I would rather have zero than have any bit of Royce O'Neal if he's 36% owned. That just feels like a really easy place to be on, to cut the field in close to half at this point. I'm going to start with Durant after this. What are you doing with Royce O'Neal and Joe Harris, the two guys getting ownership?
I think they should be getting ownership. O'Neal, averaging around 36, 37 minutes per game, played 41 against Dallas on Monday. Joe Harris got up to 33 minutes. That's really good to see. He had been living around 30 minutes. He's not a good point per minute guy. He's a low usage guy, but 4,200, if you're going to get north of 30 minutes with shooting guard, small forward eligibility, he deserves some ownership. It's another case where he's probably going over owned at 19 or 20%, but that doesn't mean you can't play the guy. It just means, look at the rest of your lineup. Make sure, if you're playing Joe Harris, maybe play Jalen Brunson instead of Terry Rozier in that lineup. Stuff like that. So should be pretty easy still on a slate of this size to make lineups that are contrarian while still getting the guys like Joe Harris. Royce O'Neal's playing time looks great. We've talked about it a lot. He's basically the same fantasy guy that he's been in the past. The difference is that his minutes are very, very secure on this team. He's averaging 0.74 DraftKings points per minute, 13.5% usage rate. Does have a 15.5% assist percentage as well. So, not totally scoring dependent on, for a 15% usage guy. But it's just there's nobody behind him to take his minutes. In Utah, you would see his minutes sort of fluctuate because based on how the game was going, you had different competent guys that could be in that rotation. For Brooklyn, this team blows. And so there's nothing behind Royce O'Neal to take those minutes away. Just makes him look pretty solid.
Yeah. I got to 16% at that 36% number. That is good enough for me. And that value, we're going to get new value throughout the day that just sort of makes that kind of play less interesting. It's inevitable. I like KD, but 11K on DraftKings, 11.2 on FanDuel. I just don't know if I like him as much as some of the other potential pay-up options, Giannis included, but always happy to get to KD if I can.
Yeah, for sure. He's just another one. That's how all pay-up options have become at this point with how aggressive the pricing has gotten on them. I'm happy to get to them. It's just that they're not underpriced like they used to be. You used to be, KD here would be 10K and Giannis would be like 11.2. And so their median projection would be good for their salary. Now they're just like everybody else. Their ceiling game obviously is higher than everybody else, but they're just as likely to hit it as, a 7K, whoever you want to name. It's just, obviously you're happy to get them, but it's much more difficult to prioritize them at their current salaries. From a rotation standpoint, we did see Ben Simmons just essentially back up Nick Claxton.
Yeah.
If that continues, I think it's bad for Claxton. Last game, you only got the 16 minutes from Simmons, so you got 32 from Claxton, but I expect that to start being very close to a 24-24 split as Simmons gets back into game shape and playing more minutes. So it makes me a lot more nervous to go to Claxton knowing that he has Simmons just straight backing him up than if they were playing Simmons alongside him.
I don't have too much interest in Cam Thomas, who stepped into 28 plus minutes the past 3 games. He's already 5K on DraftKings, 5,700 on FanDuel. The meat's off the bone.
Yeah, so he's been playing a lot, but that salary moved very quickly.
Sure did. I don't have anything else for Brooklyn.
No, me
neither. Let's go to Houston. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to agree with Marcus Amparo. DraftKings went from really soft pricing, do they even give a shit about this product anymore, to it's almost like live finals pricing. That's normally where it'll be soft for the entire season, and then whatever day the live final is, it's everything's dialed in. It's almost like they just switched to that very early in the season.
The Houston Rockets are 9-point underdogs in Toronto, 224 total. Rockets are still without Jayshawn Tate and Bruno Fernando. Jalen Green's 11% owned on DraftKings. Alperen Şengün's like 12. Porter and Green are both in the low teens on FanDuel, as is Şengün. Nobody that I'm just like, man, that's the guy that I got to get a lot of. But I agree, like Porter, Green, Şengün. I'd like to have 10-ish% of these guys. Terrible matchup.
They all just look pretty good. Matchup sucks, like you said, but 6,500 for Şengün, who's averaging 28 to 30 minutes per game as a starter, averaging around 1.25 DraftKings points per minute. There's clearly some upside there. Jalen Green, 6,100. Very, very difficult to rely on him because he's a very scoring dependent guy, but he's also cheap and certainly capable of scoring at a high rate. You saw it last game when he was like a 0.5% owned that had 35 DraftKings points at halftime. Kevin Porter Jr., the guy that you can rely on a little bit more because in addition to having similar usage to Jalen Green, he's got, he leads the team in assist percentage, but he's also more expensive, playing 34, 35 minutes per game, averaging around 1.1 DraftKings points per minute. Any of those guys look pretty good to me.
Yeah, I wish I had more to say here about Houston, but it's pretty cut and dry.
Usman Garuba's pulling 5% ownership, I guess just because he's literally min salary.
Yeah, and he's played 25 and 19 minutes over the past two. Seems like they've like firmed up the rotation a little bit. But yeah, I mean, hopefully we find better options than that by the end of the day.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Onekwo Okongwu corollary.
Yeah. For Toronto, we have no Pascal Siakam once again, but the rest of this should be pretty easy. Everybody else is just normal. And when it comes to Toronto, I want 4 guys and 4 guys only. Anunoby, VanVleet, Barnes, Trent. I'll pretty much take any order of these guys, depending on which site. FanDuel, they don't look as good as they do on DraftKings, but they're all basically in the mid-teens in ownership. I'm getting to all of them, and you should.
Yeah, I think all 4 of those guys look great. Yeah, I mean, they're all going to play big minutes. You get a lot of opportunities with Pascal Siakam out. Even if you go back to last year, you would get increased opportunities for these guys. But this year, the entire offense is just run through Pascal Siakam. So, you're taking a mid-30s usage rate guy off the floor. Without him on the floor, 126 minutes this year, 24.5% usage rate for Fred VanVleet, 39% assist percentage, 1.27 DraftKings points per minute. This is somebody that was averaging just shy of a fantasy point per minute overall with about a 17% usage rate this year. Scotty Barnes has a 21% usage rate without Siakam on the floor, averaging 1 DraftKings point per minute, but also only a 46% true shooting percentage. So that tells you that he is likely to average much more than that going forward without Siakam on the floor. Anunoby, 22% usage rate, 0.9 DraftKings points per minute. Trent, 24.5% usage rate. All 4 of these guys are going to look good. I think VanVleet at 8,100 is probably my favorite. And then Barnes, Anunoby, Trent all look similar. If you want to gamble on Chris Boucher, I don't absolutely hate it, but his price tag did jump to 5,300. He hasn't been getting the minutes that we necessarily expect recently. Only played 14.5 last game. Achua played 13.5. Otto Porter played more than both of them with 17. You could certainly get Otto Porter stepping into an even bigger role as time goes on. So I don't think that, I don't think Boucher is likely to succeed, but there is a path to him playing well and just getting a bunch of minutes. Otto Porter at 3,600 though, I think is actually kind of interesting.
I agree. You would think they probably want to get him up around 20 minutes a game. The fact that he played the back-to-back lets me know that he's probably feeling a little bit better.
Played the back-to-back, played 17 minutes, played garbage time in the back-to-back.
That's nuts.
It was only a couple of minutes, but that's actually a really encouraging sign for me because I always read that as we're going to take this opportunity to get Otto Porter a few more minutes so that we can play him more minutes going forward, is how I read situations like that.
Brandon Wagner says, I never get VanVleet right. When I play, he shoots 1 for 15. Maybe it's because you can't spell his last name. Maybe you'd get him right if you spelled it VanVleet.
So many people still do that. The dude's been in the league for a decade.
I don't get, and good too. He's not like a bench guard. It very little bothers me as much as the way that people whiff on that. It's infuriating, but that's why you never get him right, because you can't spell his name. Same way that no one could spell Osimo.
To be fair, I can spell his name, and I also rarely get him right. So I played him on that short slate the other day. I played him in like 92% of my lineups, and he scored 55 DraftKings points, and I was absolutely shocked that I didn't get the 1 for 20 shooting game from him. But in all seriousness, if Usman Garuba is going to pull 5% ownership and Onekwa Okongwu is going to pull 10 at center,
Yeah,
give me Otto Porter Jr. at no ownership and not center.
I agree. What you should also take is a nice deal on Prize Picks, presenting sponsor of this show. If you click the link in the description, head on over to Prize Picks and make a deposit. They will match it up to $100. You will not need an optimizer for it. You're going to pick player props. Put together 5-on-1 card. You'll net up to 10x your entry fee. They've got fantasy scores up for today, which means I could hit Adam with a couple fantasy score over-unders. Again, this is FanDuel scoring. How do you feel about Luka Doncic? Over under 58.5 FanDuel points.
We have 58.45, so very, very strong under there.
Yeah, I got 59.9, so I would lean over, but not totally. Very popular today, Terry Rozier, over under 39.5.
Over, we have 42.3.
I have 39.6, so I am smack dab on top of that one. Who else was interesting so far for today? Let's go to Buddy Hield, over under 32.5.
Need to find that one.
Wow.
We have 31.8, so I guess I would lean under, but we also have him at 33.5 minutes. I think he probably plays more than that.
I got him at 32.4, so another number that's just spot on for me. We'll close it out. Final guy. Let's see. Who looks most interesting? Fred VanVleet. Let's go back to him. VanVleet here. Over under 42.5 fantasy points.
I like the over. We have him projected a little bit under, but we also have 35 minutes, so
okay.
I'd be fine giving him a couple more.
Yeah, I have him at 43.5, so I like the over as well. Prize Picks, everybody, go check it out. On to game number 8, New Orleans Pelicans at the Chicago Bulls, 229 total for the Pels. Full strength other than the Q tag on Larry Nance, which actually is very important. I find the Pelicans to be mostly uninteresting. I think Ingram and Zion are the only two guys that I would really want to get to. But if Larry Nance sits today, I think we open up the possibility for Joval to actually close games like a normal person and then play 30 minutes. But I don't even know how much that matters at 7K or 6,900. The price hasn't come down to match what he's normally doing. So I find the Pelicans to be mostly uninteresting.
Yeah, if everybody's healthy, I agree with that. But yeah, I do think that's a really good point. Like, we know Joval's a very good point per minute guy. It's just that you can't project him for more than 25 or 26 minutes if Larry Nance is active, because he's just playing backup center minutes and closing over Joval. If he's out, this is a spot where I think you maybe see people not react strongly enough to that, because Nance isn't really a DFS play. So I think there's a tendency for people to just be like, yeah, who cares? It doesn't matter. You could very easily see that mean like 8 more minutes for Joval or something. So he'd still be risky if Nance is out, but I do think he'd be a good tournament play if Nance sits. It's just tough to really like a lot from this team with everybody active. Zion's price tag is down to 8,300. That's a drop from, like a $400 drop from where it was. Makes him look a little bit interesting. I think that's my favorite play from New Orleans. Ingram looks fine at 7,900, but yeah, not a ton that stands out. I do like that $8,300 price tag on Zion.
640 people in here, 100 likes. Not nearly enough. Guys, you sleeping today while you're listening to the show? Hit the thumbs up. We should not be anywhere near 100 with 600 plus people in here. So let's keep it moving. We'll go over to the Chicago side of this one. Not too much to talk about here for the Bulls. Lonzo's still out. Kobe White's still out. Q tag on Andre Drummond, which I guess does create a little bit of a trickle down. Zach LaVine continues to be just 7K on FanDuel. To me, the only interesting part of Chicago. Assuming Andre Drummond is back, I probably don't want anything here. And even if he's not, I probably still don't want anything here.
Yeah, nothing really that stands out to me. If he's not back, then again, you can give an extra couple of minutes to Vucevic and makes him look a little bit better. He's still, 8K, so I don't think it makes him. I don't think it's a situation where he looks like a slam dunk if Drummond's out and bad if he's in. It's kind of just like he's fine regardless. He's a little bit better if Drummond is out. LaVine at 7,400, no issue getting there. He's only averaged 1.08 DraftKings points per minute this year, but certainly has the ability to just go out there and throw up some monster games. So I think Vooch and LaVine are the two guys I would be likely to get to from this team.
I wish I had more to talk about for Chicago. It's a team that I always think that I'm going to get, and then I get like a 10% of Levine, and that's it.
Yeah, they're a team that I like in tournaments. They're just one of those teams where, very similar to New Orleans on the other side, when everybody's healthy, the median projections for most of their players are fine, but nothing that really stands out. But you're talking about one game sample sizes, so everything's not just going to play to the median. Within any given game, you're going to get your Levine games, your Vooch games, your DeRozan games. It makes them appealing in tournaments because that median projection does hold down their ownership.
All righty, let's get to game number 9. The Phoenix Suns, 2.5-point favorites in Minnesota, 225.5. This is where it gets a little tricky. We've got some Phoenix news, and it's important. Obviously, Cam Johnson out for a while, but Chris Paul is questionable. The trickle down that would have is massive. Cam Payne starts becoming pretty interesting. He played a ton of minutes after Chris Paul left on Monday. You just create a lot of additional playing time if it happens. So for now, DeAndre Ayton, 6,400 on DraftKings, 6,700 on FanDuel. He is the highest owned guy in this game. Booker's getting some love at 8,600 on FanDuel. This is all assuming Chris Paul is playing, I would imagine. Let's just start with the Ayton projection here. 20% owned. How do you feel about that at 6,400?
I think he's underpriced. I don't love the rotations that he's been getting this year. He played 30 and a half minutes last game. I think he's typically playing like 28, 29. I wish I could project him for more, but at 6,400, if I give him 29 minutes, give or take, he's still going to look like a really good option. I think that ownership is deserved. He's averaging 1.09 DraftKings points per minute. 26.7% usage rate is higher than every player on the team not named Devin Booker. 17% rebounding percentage leads the team. He's good. There's obviously alternatives. If you want to pivot away from him in any given lineup, there's a lot of good centers, but I think he's just pretty clearly mispriced.
Think about how much ownership is going to DeAndre Ayton and Miles Turner today.
Yeah, you're talking like 50% total ownership to those two.
Yeah.
It's just a situation like it's deserved. I think those are clearly two of the best center plays, two of the best plays on the entire slate. Yep. There's also like they are better than if you put them up against any other individual center, they are favored. If you put them up against the field, it's still very likely they're not the best two centers.
Absolutely. If Chris Paul doesn't play, Cam Payne 4,300 just like by default becomes a really interesting play. Doesn't really even matter how much you're really projecting for him. You're going to be at 24 at a minimum, I would guess, and at that point, he's just going to look good.
Yeah, definitely swapping to a bunch of Cameron Payne if we get that news after lock. Started the second half, like you said, ended up playing 27, almost 28 minutes in that game. But in the second half, he played like 16, 17 minutes. He's a good fantasy producer. 39 minutes without Paul this year, 1.3 DraftKings points per minute. I don't expect that from him, but should be around, fantasy point per minute or so. Devin Booker obviously looks better. Sorry, that was with Booker off for some reason. I clicked the wrong name. Booker looks better without Paul as well if he's out. Payne this year, 138 minutes without Paul, 1.07 DraftKings points per minute. Booker, 123 minutes, 1.16 DraftKings points per minute.
Anything else for Phoenix?
No.
Okay. Minnesota side, we get Gobert back. He was on health and safety protocols. So this team just doesn't look good. Highest owned guy on Minnesota on the DraftKings side is 0.7% owned Anthony Edwards. I actually think he's getting underrepresented there. I like Anthony Edwards quite a bit in this spot. 7% owned on FanDuel. He's the only guy to be higher than 1% owned on DraftKings or FanDuel. I like Edwards. I don't like the rest of Minnesota.
Yeah, this is another team where it's just when everybody's healthy, you can point to any of them and say like, oh, he's going to have some good games. He's a interesting tournament play at 1%, but there's nothing like I can't say like, oh yeah, I think this is a great spot for Anthony Edwards. I think he's going to do really well. Jaylen Brown, same price point, getting like 6% ownership. I'm just more likely to get to him before I get to Edwards. But yeah, like Edwards certainly capable of going off. The issue with Karl Anthony Towns is that his price tag jumped really quickly for Gobert being out. Now Gobert's back. So you have Towns, his rebounding rate takes a hit and he's still priced like it's last season. So that becomes difficult to get to, even though clearly he's capable of having good games. It's really difficult to single out anything from this team. I do agree with you. I think that if I'm playing one of them, Edwards is probably the one I go to first.
By the way, Edwards, 7,400 on FanDuel, $800 cheaper than DraftKings. Just a infinitely better play there.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, to Jeremy Savage's point, like the spacing is a real issue for Anthony Edwards.
It is. The Milwaukee Bucks are 6.5-point favorites in OKC, 218 total. Doubtful tag on Drew Holiday. Still no Middleton, Connaughton, Ingles. Giannis is in. Giannis 20% owned on DraftKings, 44% owned on FanDuel at 11,600. I can't disagree with it. This is going to sound preposterous. I didn't notice it until right now, but that's where the rates took me. I've got Giannis projected for 1.9 fantasy points per minute on FanDuel today.
That's a lot, but I mean, it's reasonable. Like, what's he at for the season? 1.8,
1.79. Yeah. So like, no Drew. Giannis just gets a bump in everything. He's the point guard, the shooting guard, the small forward, the power forward, and the center all at the same time. He's 44% owned on FanDuel, though, is interesting.
He's Jane Lynch in Role Models.
Can't BS a BSer.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he looks great. Like, there's no way around that. Obviously, he's expensive, but you are getting a different role for him due to injuries. He obviously already does a lot when he's on the floor, but now just going to do even more. Without Drew this year, pulling those numbers up now, but 94 minutes played, 37.8% usage rate, and a 59.1% assist percentage, 1.82 DraftKings points per minute in 192 possessions. Just looks ridiculously good.
Pace the Beast, Minotaur.
I watched that the other day.
So did I.
That is such an underrated movie.
It's great. It's great. Man, McLovin's fantastic, and everybody's great in it.
Yeah, it's such a good movie.
Not the only person getting ownership though for Giannis. 12% going to George Hill on DraftKings at 3,200. He should step into some extra time. 38% going to Bobby Portis on FanDuel at 5,900. I like that price tag. I don't know if Bobby Portis gets any more minutes in this spot with Drew Holiday out. Can we talk about that for a second? Because 38 just, you've got to be projecting him for a very specific kind of day today.
So I agree with you. I don't know that he plays more minutes with Drew out. I do like just the rotations they've been running for him recently. He's just playing more minutes alongside Brook Lopez. You're seeing both of those guys play a bit more. So I like that aspect of it. And obviously he's a good point per minute guy. You're going to have, you're taking a 26% usage guy off the floor in Holiday. 79 minutes without Drew this year. Portis has a 29% usage rate, 1.4 DraftKings points per minute. I think he looks good. I agree with you that I don't necessarily think he gets a lot of extra minutes.
Yeah, not brown eye, whispering eye.
Yeah.
Yeah, like 38% ownership. Like, I'm just going to assume that Bobby Portis is playing like his normal-ish, slightly boosted rates from Drew situation. I don't know how he gets to 38% unless we're just assuming that he's starting and they're going ultra big, which I don't think they are. Javon Carter's the guy that I want. 8% owned on DraftKings at 3,900, 15 on FanDuel at 3,800. This is my paydown option. I gave him 30 minutes. I think those minutes are firm. Is he a great per minute performer? No, but like, I like Javon Carter more than I like George Hill.
Yeah, you can have fun with Javon Carter. No, I mean, I agree with you. Like,
yeah, I don't like this.
He's a reasonable value. I don't think I'm like jamming him into a bunch of lineups or anything. I think that 8% ownership makes some sense. He's just a shitty point per minute guy, but he should get more minutes here. Probably get more minutes for George Hill as well. Another shitty point per minute guy. Probably get more minutes for Beauchamp. Not as bad a point per minute guy, but also not a good point per minute guy. 3,300 for him. I don't want a ton of any of this, but I think Carter's the first guy for me. Grayson Allen probably plays a bit more. He's 4,600. He's also very not exciting.
Yeah. Team Giannis.
Yeah. George Hill getting 13%. I mean, I get it, but also that's disgusting.
So bad. On the OKC side, you can only play 3 guys on this team. That's Dort, that's SGA, that's Giddey. As far as I'm concerned, it's only SGA today. If you get to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at 9,100 on DraftKings, enjoy it. Ignore this team.
Yeah, play SGA. If you get to a little bit of Giddey or Dort, that's fine. Pretend the rest of these guys do not exist.
Done. I don't have any. I can't talk about this team any longer. It doesn't matter. Everybody's in.
The only exception to what I just said is if Jalen Williams starts and you want to gamble on 4K Jalen Williams at no ownership, fine. He's going to play somewhere between 12 and 30 minutes. Hope that it's 30.
Yeah. OKC is a team that like you might swap into later today based on whatever they announce, but like you're not going into lock with like Jeremiah Robinson Earl shares on purpose.
Right. Giannis should be sub K. He's been trash lately. Excellent take.
Can you imagine saying that? Seriously. Trash lately. 1.79 FanDuel points per minute this season for Giannis. What's lately? This season? I mean, that's what, 8 games?
I think he's had a rough last game, maybe 2.
Hold on. I have them all here. So
40.25 last game, 63.5, 68, 44.75, 64 and a quarter, 66, 74 and a half, 64, 58 and 3/4.
Fantasy points per minute this season: 1.5, 1.65, 2.5, 1.4, 1.9, 1.6, 1.9, 2, 1.65. His worst game this season was 1.4 fantasy points per minute, which would make him like the 6th highest scorer in the league.
His worst game is basically what Nikola Jokic does.
Yeah. So you sound stupid when you talk. Memphis Grizzlies are 6.5 point favorites in San Antonio, 234 total, second biggest total on the slate. For the Grizzlies, they're back at full strength, except for we don't know the status of Steven Adams. I feel like if Steven Adams sits out one game for a rolled ankle, he's coming back for the next one. So I have everybody in right now, at which point Bane, 15% owned on both sites, seems reasonable. I like Dylan Brooks a little bit more than I like Desmond Bane, 5,400 shooting guard, small forward eligibility. And then we must be projecting Steven Adams out because we've got Brandon Clark at 30 minutes. That's not happening if Steven Adams plays.
Yeah, and if Adams is out, Clark does look like a good value. If
Yes.
Adams is in, you can pretty safely ignore Brandon Clark outside of rolling the dice in large field tournaments if you want to in non-Steven Adams lineups. But yeah, I mean, Desmond Bane, shooting guard, small forward, 7,700. He's another guy, at that Terry Rozier price range. He's getting some ownership. He looks good. Just a really good player. Good spot. Huge implied total for Memphis. Yeah, if Adams is out, Clark looks good. If Adams is in, I think Adams is fine. Like, you're probably getting 26, 27 minutes from him. Yeah. Clearly can give you a solid double-double there. I love Morant, but it's also pretty difficult to get to that price, especially if you're prioritizing Giannis. So yeah, I think Bane's probably the guy I get to most if Adams is in. Clark's probably the guy I get to most if Adams is out.
Yeah, Clark becomes a no-brainer. What would you go, 28 or 30 for Clark on a start?
Yeah, I'm pulling up now to see what he did last game. I think I projected 26 last game.
Jesus.
What?
We might not get through this slate.
Oh, it's 10:55.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Clark played 30 last game. There's always going to be some risk of foul trouble. I would probably go 28 as a projection.
For the San Antonio Spurs, Devin Vassell is 20% owned on DraftKings. Vassell, Pirtle, Jones, all about 10% on FanDuel. I don't have anybody that just immediately jumps out to me other than I think Vassell does look good, but I don't think that Keldon Johnson, Vassell, or Jakob Pirtle look all that different relative to each other. Just better eligibility.
Yeah, agreed. Any of these guys look fine. None of them really look like priorities, I don't think. Vassell did get back into the starting lineup. He's only 6,500. He's been really good this year. Plenty of opportunities available for him.
Any other priorities that we need to touch on for San Antonio here? It's a great game environment.
Yeah, Keldon Johnson, Jakob Pirtle, and Devin Vassell all averaging 1.14 to 1.16 DraftKings points per minute this year. Pirtle obviously has the worst positional eligibility.
On the Lakers, they are in, I use in quotes, LA, taking on the Clippers. So Battle of Los Angeles. Lakers are 5-point dogs, 220 total. Everybody's available except for a Q tag on Lonnie Walker, but Beverly back, LeBron in, AD in, and no one getting any ownership. 2% is the most you see on DraftKings. 7% for $10,100 LeBron on FanDuel. I would be fine getting to a little bit of LeBron on FanDuel, but this is not a team that has like legitimate DFS options today.
Yeah, pretty easy, I think, to just sort of overlook this team. Clearly, Anthony Davis and LeBron are always fine. Westbrook's salaries come up a bit. There's just enough spots on this slate where guys are missing or expected to miss, and there's value where it's just difficult for me to get to the Lakers with any sort of frequency.
And then you get to this confusing Clippers team where the minutes have just changed over their past 5 games. Paul George plays a ton. Marcus Morris plays a ton. Zubats has played a ton. Reggie Jackson, when he's here, is playing a ton. And they're basically not playing John Wall with Reggie Jackson. Like, it happens right. It happens few and far between.
Yeah, you got that random 28-minute John Wall game 2 games ago. But Yeah.
Which was interesting because you only got 20 minutes out of Reggie Jackson. Any one of these games where Reggie's playing like 30 plus, you're not getting those crazy games.
Yeah.
Or you need a bunch of guys out.
Yeah, the thing that's really stood out to me is those Marcus Morris minutes. I know I've mentioned it before. I saw it when it started happening, and I was like, I don't know what to do with this because they can change it at any point. But it's just consistently been a thing now where he's playing 36 to 38 minutes in competitive games. I'm comfortable at this point projecting him like 34 minutes. It makes him look decent. His price tag has jumped a bit to 6K, getting 7% ownership. Zubats at 6,600, just another mid-range center where if you get to him, that's great. Yeah. I think Morris and Zubats probably the guys I get to the most. Paul George, 10-2. Like I like getting the Paul George, but also very difficult at that price tag, I think.
SGA doesn't limit Giddey's ceiling. Giddey limits SGA. One of those guys is really, really, really good, and the other one isn't. It's a weird way to look at that one. I'm surprised there's not a lot of ownership coming in on the DraftKings side. Like I like the Morris piece here at 6K. He is getting the ownership on FanDuel, 24% owned at 5,300. I also like Reggie Jackson at 4,500, but man, that dude is ass.
Yes, he is.
John Wall getting 15% on FanDuel at 4,800. There's not a likely scenario of me touching that one, but you got to assume that he's playing 28 minutes for that to happen, I think.
Yeah, 5% seems kind of high. Like, I mean, I get the upside there, but it seems like the ownership is kind of
15 on FanDuel.
Oh, wow. What's his price on FanDuel?
4,800.
I mean, I get it, but still.
You just have to assume his most recent 2 games are like the norm now.
Which they could be. I mean, Reggie Jackson does suck.
He does. And then we close it out. Cleveland Cavaliers, 5-point favorites in Sacramento, 225 total. Cleveland is at full strength, which makes them mildly interesting. In that, Darius Garland is only 6,900 on DraftKings and pulling 34% ownership. Darius Garland looks great.
Yeah, he's another one where I think he's going over-owned, but also just one of the clear best plays. I don't know why this price tag isn't moving as quickly as other players are, but he's playing huge minutes for the Cavs. He's really, really, really good. This is just a mispricing. Feel free to play him in tournaments. Just be different somewhere else in your lineup. So far, 132 minutes this year, 1.15 DraftKings points per minute. 28% usage rate, 42% assist percentage, probably playing 36 or 37 minutes. It's kind of just a no-brainer that he's underpriced.
Is there anything else for you for Cleveland?
Not really. Jared Allen, Kevin Love, those guys are fine at their price points, but not really priorities. Evan Mobley getting a little bit of ownership at 5,900. That's a pretty cheap price tag on him. But at the same time, he has averaged less than a fantasy point per minute this season. He's not great in any one category. Like, he's giving up usage to Garland and Mitchell. He's giving up rebounding to Jared Allen. He's not getting a ton of assists. So he's a good player. Like, he's going to have some games, but I don't really think the price is incorrect.
Only Malik Monk is getting ownership on Sacramento, 16%. Sure, he is also questionable for today. No other ownership going to Sacramento. Do you have any priorities for the Kings?
I do not. De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, obviously very high upside options. Also probably correctly priced. Malik Monk, the only guy really getting ownership here, 4,200. Minutes are scary because he's playing off the bench and there's going to just be some games where they disappear. But at the same time, he is a solid bench scorer. He does have a path to real minutes here, and he is really cheap. So I understand why he's getting some ownership. Played 30 and a half minutes, closed the last game. Doesn't need to play that many minutes to be a good play at 4,200.
Injury report video coming up in a bit, and GPP plays?
Yep, and I'll have the FanDuel one out a little bit earlier since they decided to start their slate at 5:30.
There we go. NFL Strategy Show Ownership Edition coming up right now. My apologies for running long on this one. Good luck today. Deeper dive, 4:45. Don't miss it. We'll talk to you later.